My beloved child, something is beginning to shift around your life. You may not fully see it yet. You may not completely understand it yet. But deep within your spirit, you can feel it. The heaviness is not the same anymore. The waiting is not the same anymore. The silence is not the same anymore. Because a hidden door is beginning to open. As it is written, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it?" In Isaiah 43:19, "My child, there are blessings I prepared long before you ever reached this season of your life. Doors already assigned to your future, connections already aligned with your purpose, moments already written into your journey before you were even aware they existed. But because human eyes only see the present moment, you assumed nothing was happening. You mistook hidden preparation for abandonment. You mistook delay for denial. You mistook silence for absence. Yet all this time, heaven was arranging things beyond your understanding. My beloved, there are opportunities approaching your life that could not arrive until your spirit became ready to carry them. Because blessing without healing becomes self-destruction, and success without peace becomes emptiness. That is why I focused on your inner life first. Your character, your discernment, your emotional healing, your spiritual awakening. Because the next season requires a different version of you than the one who entered the wilderness. You are no longer the same person. The pain changed you. The waiting refined you. The heartbreak awakened wisdom inside you. And now, doors that once remained closed are beginning to respond differently to your presence. Not because you became perfect, but because transformation changed your spirit. My child, some doors were always meant to remain closed. You cried over them, begged for them, questioned yourself because of them. But had those doors opened, they would have led you away from the peace I was preparing. Not every open door comes from me, and not every closed door is rejection. Some closed doors are rescue missions in disguise. But now, there is a door ahead of you that carries peace instead of confusion, alignment instead of anxiety, purpose instead of emptiness. And though you cannot fully see it yet, your spirit already senses the shift beginning. That is why certain old environments suddenly feel uncomfortable. That is why old conversations no longer satisfy you. That is why distractions that once consumed your attention are losing power over you. Your soul is preparing for elevation. My beloved child, hidden doors rarely open with loud announcements. Sometimes they begin with subtle changes, a new opportunity, a new connection, a sudden moment of clarity, a deep feeling that you can no longer remain where you once were. And often, the greatest breakthroughs begin quietly, like dawn slowly entering darkness. You keep expecting transformation to appear dramatically, but many miracles begin invisibly before becoming visible. Even now, there are things moving behind the scenes for you, conversations happening you know nothing about, people being positioned, delays being removed, paths being cleared, and yes, spiritual resistance is still trying to convince you to stay afraid. Because fear knows what happens once you finally step through the door prepared for you. You will never be the same again. My child, there were seasons where you doubted your own future so deeply that you stopped planning ahead emotionally. You learned to expect disappointment before joy. You learned to protect yourself by imagining the worst. And slowly, survival became more familiar than expectation. But hear me clearly tonight. You cannot fully walk into new seasons while emotionally living in old pain. The hidden door ahead of you does not open through fear. It opens through trust. That does not mean you will suddenly have no uncertainty. It means you choose faith even while uncertainty still exists. My beloved, remember Peter stepping out onto the water. The storm still surrounded him. The wind still existed. The waves still moved violently around him. Yet the miracle began the moment he stepped forward despite fear. And my child, Your next season requires movement, not perfection, not complete understanding, movement. There is a step you have been afraid to take, a decision delayed by overthinking, a healing you keep postponing, a part of your life where fear still whispers, "Stay where it is safe." But safety is not always peace. Sometimes what feels safe is simply familiar pain. And familiar pain keeps many souls trapped for years. But you are not being called backward anymore. You are being called forward, toward healing, toward purpose, toward freedom, toward the version of yourself heaven always saw beneath the wounds. My beloved child, some of you have been praying for confirmation while ignoring the transformation already happening within you. You asked for signs while your spirit was already changing. You asked whether doors would open while heaven was already repositioning your entire life. You thought breakthrough would only look external, money, relationships, success, opportunities, but the greatest breakthrough already started internally. You think differently now. You see differently now. You recognize unhealthy patterns more clearly now. You no longer crave the same chaos that once controlled you. That itself is evidence that transformation is happening. And now, the external world is slowly beginning to align with what has already shifted within you. My child, do not fear the unfamiliar season approaching. You prayed for change. But when change begins arriving, fear often tries convincing people to retreat. Do not retreat now. You survived too much to stop at the edge of your breakthrough. And yes, there will still be moments of uncertainty, moments where old fears try returning, moments where your mind questions whether you are truly ready. But readiness was never about having complete confidence in yourself. It was always about trusting me, because I do not call you into places I refuse to walk beside you through. Listen carefully now. The hidden door opening before you is not only connected to opportunity, it is connected to identity. The next season will reveal who you truly are beneath survival mode, beneath fear, beneath shame, beneath emotional exhaustion. And people who once underestimated you will not recognize the peace resting on your spirit. Because healing changes a person differently than success ever could. My beloved child, you are entering a season where clarity begins replacing confusion, where peace begins replacing inner chaos, where alignment begins replacing forced striving. And though the process still feels incomplete, heaven is already moving. The door is already forming. The breakthrough is already unfolding, even now, quietly, powerfully, irreversibly. But listen closely. There is one thing you must not do when the blessing finally arrives. Because many people destroy their own peace the moment heaven starts answering their prayers. And what God reveals next may protect your future more than you realize. My beloved child, now that your spirit is beginning to awaken, now that healing has started moving within you, now that the hidden door is beginning to open, the resistance may suddenly feel stronger than before. Do not be afraid of this, and do not misunderstand it, because often the greatest spiritual attacks come right before breakthrough. As it is written, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life." James 1:12. My child, the enemy knows he cannot stop what I have already ordained for your life, but he will still try to delay it through fear, through confusion, through discouragement, through emotional exhaustion. That is why some of you have recently felt waves of heaviness returning unexpectedly. Thoughts you thought were healed suddenly resurfacing, old fears whispering again, anxiety trying to reclaim your peace. You wondered, why is this happening now? But listen carefully. The resistance intensified because your spirit is moving closer to freedom. Darkness fights hardest when it realizes it is losing access to your mind. My beloved child, there are moments right before transformation where everything inside you feels conflicted. Part of you feels hope rising again, But another part still remembers every past disappointment. Part of you wants to trust, but another part fears being hurt again. Part of you senses breakthrough approaching, but another part expects everything to collapse the way it always did before. That internal battle has exhausted you lately, and the enemy hopes that exhaustion will make you quit before you fully step into your next season. Because if he can convince you to retreat now, he can keep you trapped in cycles you were already beginning to escape. But my beloved, do not retreat. You did not survive all those battles just to surrender at the edge of your breakthrough. Listen carefully tonight. The attack is not proof that you are losing. Sometimes the attack is proof that you are finally moving in the right direction. Think about it, my child. Why would darkness fight so hard over a life with no purpose? Why would fear keep targeting your mind if your future carried no significance? Why would the enemy spend years trying to destroy your confidence if there was nothing valuable within you? Because even your battles reveal something about your calling. The enemy attacks what threatens his control, and your healing threatens darkness more than you realize. A healed soul becomes dangerous to fear. A healed mind becomes difficult to manipulate. A healed spirit begins walking with authority instead of shame. And my child, that transformation has already begun inside you. That is why old chains are reacting. The insecurity, the fear of abandonment, the self-doubt, the emotional dependency, the hopeless thinking. All of it feels threatened because you are changing, quietly, deeply, permanently. But listen closely. This next battle is different from the ones before, because before you were fighting without understanding what was happening. Now your eyes are opening. Now you recognize the lies quicker. Now you recognize what drains your spirit. Now you notice when fear is trying to speak louder than truth. Awareness changes battles, because you no longer automatically believe every dark thought entering your mind. You are learning discernment, and discernment breaks deception. My beloved child, some of the attacks coming against you now are actually attempts to pull you back into old identities. The enemy wants the healed version of you to doubt itself. He wants you to reopen doors I already closed. He wants you to return to people who wounded your spirit. He wants you to sabotage your own peace because chaos feels more familiar than healing. And yes, part of you still feels tempted sometimes. Because healing can feel unfamiliar at first. Peace can feel strange after years of emotional survival mode. Healthy boundaries can feel uncomfortable after constantly overextending yourself for others. But do not mistake unfamiliarity for wrongness. The new season feels different because you are different now. My beloved, there are also people who may not understand the transformation happening within you. Some will call your healing distance. Some will call your boundaries selfishness. Some will become uncomfortable because your growth exposes their unwillingness to grow themselves. And the enemy may use guilt to tempt you into shrinking yourself again just to keep others comfortable. Do not do it. Do not abandon your healing to maintain unhealthy peace with wounded people. You prayed for freedom, now protect it. You prayed for clarity, now honor it. You prayed for transformation. Now stop apologizing for becoming who I created you to be. My child, the final attacks before breakthrough often look emotional rather than physical. Sudden discouragement, sudden loneliness, sudden temptation to isolate yourself. Sudden fear that nothing is actually changing. And sometimes, the enemy will even use delay itself to wear down your faith, because he knows exhausted souls are easier to deceive. But hear me clearly tonight. You are closer than you think. Closer to healing, closer to peace, closer to clarity, closer to the breakthrough you cried for during your darkest nights. That is why fear keeps trying to become louder. Because darkness senses time running out. My beloved child, remember Elijah. Right after one of his greatest victories, fear suddenly overwhelmed him so deeply that he wanted to run away and give up completely. Even powerful people experience moments of exhaustion. Even faithful people experience emotional battles, but exhaustion does not mean failure. And temporary fear does not cancel destiny. Do you understand? You keep judging yourself for still struggling sometimes. But healing is not the absence of battle. Healing is learning not to surrender to the battle anymore. And that is exactly what you are learning now. You may still feel fear, but you keep moving anyway. You may still feel uncertain, but you are still listening for my voice. You may still have difficult days, but you are no longer fully trapped inside darkness. That is growth, my child, real growth, my beloved. The enemy also fears what will happen once you fully realize your value. Because people who know their worth stop settling for emotional chaos. People who know their worth stop begging for bare minimum love. People who know their worth stop building identity around rejection. And once your spirit fully awakens to who you are, entire cycles begin breaking. That is why the warfare increased. But hear this now, the attack is temporary. The breakthrough is lasting. The fear is temporary. The healing is lasting. The storm is temporary. The transformation is lasting. And even now, heaven is already strengthening you for what comes next. You are not fighting alone anymore. I am with you in every anxious moment, every sleepless night, every battle inside your thoughts, every moment where you feel too tired to continue. And my beloved child, you will survive this final resistance too. Not because you are perfect, but because I am carrying you through it. So do not give up now. Do not return to old chains now. Do not let fear speak louder than the healing already unfolding within you. Because the next season approaching your life is bigger than the enemy expected you to survive long enough to reach. If this message is speaking directly to your spirit, share it with someone who feels exhausted from fighting silent battles. And comment, "I will not give up." If you believe God is still working in your life, even through the struggle. Because what happens next is the moment God begins breaking cycles that existed long before you were born. My beloved child, there are battles in your life that did not begin with you, patterns that existed long before you were born, pain carried silently from one generation to another, fear passed down through wounded hearts, emotional burdens repeated so many times that people started calling them normal. But hear me clearly tonight. What repeated through generations will not continue forever through you, because I am raising you to break the cycle. As it is written, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. I plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah 29:11, my child, some of you grew up surrounded by heaviness without fully understanding why. Homes filled with tension, words filled with criticism, love that felt inconsistent, peace that never lasted long. You learned survival before you learned rest. You learned anxiety before you learned safety. You learned how to emotionally protect yourself long before you understood what healing even meant. And slowly, those wounds shaped the way you saw yourself, the way you loved, the way you trusted, the way you expected life to unfold. Some of you inherited fear without realizing it. Fear of abandonment, fear of failure, fear of intimacy, fear of rejection, fear of never being enough. And because those fears repeated for so long, you started believing they were simply part of who you are. But my beloved, inherited pain is not your identity. You were not born merely to repeat suffering. You were born to transform it. Do you understand now why the battle around your life became so intense? Because generational chains resist being broken. The moment someone begins healing, the moment someone begins awakening, the moment someone refuses to continue repeating destruction, darkness reacts. That is why your life often felt heavier than others seem to experience. You were not only fighting for yourself, you were confronting patterns that existed long before you arrived here. Patterns of emotional brokenness, patterns of silence, patterns of self-hatred, patterns of settling for unhealthy love, patterns of fear disguised as normal behavior. And my beloved child, heaven chose you to interrupt those cycles, not because you are stronger than everyone else, but because I placed something inside your spirit capable of healing what wounded generations before you. Even now, you are becoming the answer to prayers spoken before you were born. You are becoming the person who finally says, "The pain stops here." My child, I know how exhausting it has been carrying emotional weight you could never fully explain. Sometimes you felt different from the people around you, more sensitive, more aware, more emotionally burdened. And because others could not always understand your depth, you often felt isolated. But that sensitivity was not weakness, it was awareness. Your spirit recognized brokenness, even when others learned to normalize it. You saw patterns others ignored. You felt wounds others avoided discussing. And slowly, I began awakening you to truths your family line never fully confronted. Because healing begins when truth is finally acknowledged. My beloved, some of the loneliness you experienced came from becoming different. When one person begins healing inside a wounded environment, tension often follows. People comfortable with dysfunction may resist your transformation. Some will misunderstand your boundaries. Some will resent your growth. Some will accuse you of changing. And they are right. You are changing. Because the healed version of you can no longer fully participate in cycles that once destroyed your peace. You are learning to communicate differently, love differently, think differently, respond differently. And though the process feels uncomfortable, it is holy. Because cycles only break when someone chooses healing over familiarity. My child, generational pain often whispers lies that become deeply rooted over time. No one in this family succeeds. Love never lasts. People always leave. We will always struggle. This is just how life is. But tonight, I am breaking those agreements inside your spirit, because your future is not limited by the wounds that came before you. You are not trapped inside the story of past generations. I am writing something new through your life, something healed, something peaceful, something free. Listen carefully now. The enemy wanted you to become so emotionally exhausted that you would continue repeating the same cycles unconsciously, choosing the same unhealthy relationships, carrying the same fears, passing the same pain forward. But your awakening disrupted that pattern. That is why your healing matters so deeply. Because when one soul truly heals, entire future generations are affected. The peace you fight for now may become the peace your future children never have to fight for later. The emotional freedom you build now may protect lives you have not even met yet. Do you see how significant your healing really is? This is bigger than one season of pain, bigger than one heartbreak, bigger than one battle. Heaven is restoring an entire lineage through your obedience to healing. My beloved child, there were moments you almost gave up because the process felt too heavy. Moments where you wondered why life seemed harder for you than for others. Moments where emotional exhaustion made you question your purpose entirely. But now you are beginning to understand why your spirit could never fully settle into dysfunction, why chaos eventually became unbearable, why your soul kept longing for something deeper. It was because I was calling you out of survival mode, out of inherited fear, out of emotional captivity, and into freedom, real freedom. The kind your family line may have never fully experienced before. My child, do not feel guilty for outgrowing environments that damaged your spirit. Do not apologize for protecting your peace. Do not shrink your healing just to remain accepted by wounded people unwilling to change. Because your obedience to healing is sacred. And though others may not understand it now, one day they may recognize that your transformation became the beginning of restoration for many others too. My beloved, you are not cursed. You are called to heal, called to awaken, called to bring light into places where darkness repeated itself for generations. And yes, the responsibility feels heavy sometimes. but you are not carrying it alone. I am walking beside you through every step of this transformation. Every boundary you struggle to set, every painful truth you are learning to face, every old pattern you are trying not to repeat, every moment where healing feels lonely, I am with you. And heaven is strengthening you even now, because the cycles breaking in your life will create room for blessings your family line has never fully seen before. Peace, stability, healthy love, spiritual clarity, emotional freedom, joy without constant fear of losing it. And my beloved child, this transformation has already begun. Quietly, powerfully, irreversibly, the chains are weakening, the old patterns are losing power, and the version of you rising from this season will carry wisdom your past generations prayed for but never fully reached. But listen closely now. Before the breakthrough fully manifests, there is still one final surrender heaven is asking from you. And what God reveals next may finally free your heart from the burden of trying to control everything alone.